There are many programs around financial literacy, financial well-being in this country. Some are national in scale, some are grassroots and local, some are big corporate, some are nonprofit. And each bring a different perspective, a different take, a different approach to help people get a better handle on their money. We're going to focus on one out of Winnipeg called SEED Winnipeg. And we're joined by Millie Acuna. She is manager of asset building programs, and she joins us now from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hello, Millie.
Hi, Bruce, and hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. You were a part of a financial literacy event a couple of months ago that I attended, and what you had to say struck me as being both super practical and different in a conversation that I have almost every single week. It's hard to find different because I've had so many of these conversations. Start off, if you would, with a bit of background on the mandate for SEED Winnipeg. What is it that you do?
Absolutely. So SEED is actually an acronym. It's actually an acronym. SEED stands for Supporting Employment and Economic Development. We don't actually sell seeds, even though we get those calls once a
I'm
week.
sure. Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, we're in the heart of the North End in Winnipeg, where statistically, this is where our most vulnerable and low-income individuals and families live. And our mandate is to support our community with financial empowerment programs. What that looks like at SEED, really briefly, is asset building programs like identification, access to ID, which is the first thing you need in order to access benefits. Then we're doing your tax filing for free all year round. We screen for eligible benefits, federal and provincial. And then we do what's called our match savings programs, which is a combination of our financial literacy, our money management workshops, an incentive for people to open an account and save for a much needed asset, whether that's education, housing needs, business startups, health related supports, and so on. And then you get into our business sort of, I call it Narnia. You know, we look like such a small
Right.
building, but you walk in, there's so many hallways.
Yes.
And then the other side is sort of our future mode, where once we have participants have the ID, the income boosting supports, the financial literacy, then we can help them support or get them to a sustainable livelihood. And that could potentially be obtaining employment or starting a new business. And so
So
that in a nutshell, yeah.
that in a nutshell is what you do. The
Mm.
refreshing part, of the new part, is you weave in storytelling in a way that I hadn't heard of before. Tell us more about that approach.
That is definitely what we call strength-based training or participant-centered approach. And so ultimately we recognize that, you know what, we have folks who live on very limited income. They come through the door and they're like, how do I create a budget? How do I stick to one? When they've already been doing that all their lives. Like, they are resilient. They know exactly how much milk is to the penny, whereas someone else mid to high income will just, like, it's just a case of milk.
Yeah.
So ultimately, when we have our participants in our group-based settings, it's a storytelling life experience that really bring that learning, just it heightens more. It's more effective. It sticks. And that feeling of I'm not alone, and there's hope that people are listening to my situation and we're helping each other out in this community that we live in is an effective way of providing financial literacy.
It's a different way to facilitate. I mean, a lot of the stuff out there is, here are the components of a budget, and here's how you need to do X. How do you enable your facilitators to lead in that way?
Yeah, well, first of all, we remove that immediately. There's no way. We always say at the first of our classes, don't focus on calculations and to the dollar. That's not what this is. What we incorporate is actually behavioral economics. And so we're looking at, what was your understanding of money? How did you manage money to begin with? What are some of those money messages when you were growing up that impacted your money choices now? And it's really trying to open up the participants in the group. Now, here's what's really key, though, is trust and relationship building. And so as soon as you hear that typical budgeting workshop, I've even had communities tell me they've had institutions, financial institutions, come in because that's what they think they should go, is have a credit union come in and talk about budgeting, but no one's into it. They tell me they're falling asleep, it's not engaging. What people want to hear is relatable situations. And
Yeah.
so our curriculum is really designed from previous participants in our programs. It's that continual learning that as facilitators are like, oh, this didn't work, but let's try this.
Yeah.
We review this curriculum yearly to make sure that this is impactful to the people that come to our classes. And so what the real, the key to all of this is that making sure that if we're talking about low income individuals, we don't have a budget of an example of someone who's a homeowner,
Right.
and who's making $60,000 a year. We're talking someone who's working on social or with social assistance with, let's say, I don't know, $900 a budget for the month, and talking about what is it, how can we help you be sustainable? And that's what they really appreciate. We don't come in with suits. They like our sort of casual atmosphere. We do it virtually. We're talking real talk. Like, we try to remove that formal piece of it and just make it like a conversation.
For those listeners who do make $60,000 a year or even more than that, the first thing that you mentioned around ID is kind of hard to imagine in some ways because, like a lot of us got our driver's license when we were 16. We had that little card. As grownups, we had a health card. What are the circumstances in which just getting an ID is a critical step? What happens in the life of someone for whom that's something they still need to take care of? Why would they be in that circumstance?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons, but to be honest, it is colonization. I have to say, a lot of the folks that have no ID may not even know their birth registration details. And so I work a lot with First Nation communities as well. So statistically in Manitoba, our Indigenous community members are the ones faced with poverty. And so that would be one of the circumstances where folks don't have the details of their birth registration and ultimately don't have access to being like even just to apply for a birth certificate. And the cost of it is $30 here in Manitoba. But if a family of 7 apply for it, then that's significant. That's like paying groceries or paying for ID.
Yeah.
And so that's one version, another, like one reason. The other piece is, actually the cost. So forgive me, it is the cost of the ID that is a barrier to most folks.
Yeah. You have a matching program. That seems genius because it's a combination of the resources that SEED can provide, but also the human having something at stake there. How does that work? What are you trying to build with that?
Well, because it's called asset building programs for a reason. We're there to support them in the knowledge and the confidence in money management, but to put that into practice. And so ideally what happens is when they get accepted into our program, we give them access to a bank account where specifically that's where they put their savings month to month. It's about 6 months is the full length of the program. And during that 6 months, we're giving them the 8-week money management workshop. And ultimately what they learn from us is they start to practice, and we want to help them build that savings pattern or behavior. And we're talking a minimum of $5 a month if that's what their budget allows, but up to a maximum of $70 or $65 a month. And what you find out as a coordinator that is partnered with the group, the participants, life happens, Bruce. Like, it's not easy where you have this budget, you plan it out, but all these things happen. We all know one thing like what's guaranteed is challenges are going to happen. And so we get to walk alongside them to motivate them. Oh, you wanted to get a bed for yourself. You wanted to get a laptop for education. So seeing them grow and try to build into the savings account and then helping them buy their asset at the end of the 6 months is trying to promote that positive reinforcement and changing that pattern of behavior where it's like, I only got this much, but if only I can get that bed, then I can sleep. My health would be better. Maybe I could find employment, which then would promote more asset building. So that's our intent of the program.
We do a lot of work at Credit Canada with vulnerable populations. And one of the biggest challenges is sparking hope. Just like some glimmer that their circumstances could change over time because they're people who have had years, sometimes decades of evidence that really life is hopeless. As you think about the programs that you offer, what do you find is effective in just lighting that little ember for people so they can begin the small steps that can create a virtuous cycle to lead to a different future?
I truly believe it's the storytelling. When people see that there are others out there that are going through just the same circumstances or even worse, unfortunately, and they recognize that, you know what, this person did it. They were resilient, they had the supports. If someone was just willing to listen to the circumstances, and then having someone navigate some of those unfortunate, like there's some really intimidating systems out there when it comes to federal or provincial benefits, how to apply for things. Someone actually cares about my current situation and wants to walk me through, how do I stay afloat with my limited budget, but also what are some other resources that can come through? And so knowing that there's this holistic, all-inclusive sort of way of supporting a person along the way, that's where the hope comes through. That's where that ember shows. And then what's brilliant, Bruce, is what we do is we actually have some of our former participants work at SEED. So that's another thing. We are dedicated to having at least 60% of our staff here who are community members or former participants of our programs. And so for them, they went through the programs and now it's a full circle. Now they're providing it to our new participants. And that's what they love to see. It's like, wow, if they can do it, then I've got some hope for me as well. Yeah.
Really inspiring stuff. Millie, thank you for joining us to talk about it today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Millie Acuna, Manager of Asset Building Programs at SEED Winnipeg. She was here to talk about some of the programs they offer, but in particular, the thing I was most curious about is this through line of storytelling in the kind of work that they do with their clients.